All right, guys, thanks for joining us today. First podcast we've ever done, and quite fitting, we've got the first IPO that took place in 2020, and that's Nyrada, trading under the stock code NYR. We're joined by their CEO, James Bonnar. James, thanks for joining us.
Hi there, Philip.
Now, Nyrada recently listed as a biotech company on the ASX. Can you tell us a little bit about the recent IPO?
Yeah, sure. So for those not familiar with Nyrada, we're a US registered company that listed on the ASX in mid-January of this year. And we did that through a fully subscribed initial public offering. We were really delighted with how the IPO went, and in particular, the very strong support we received from new investors. So the IPO is a huge milestone for the company, and it sets us up really well for the next stage of development.
Fantastic. Well, that's great news for you, James, and the company. Can you tell us a little bit about the company itself and what makes it unique?
So Nyrada is a small cap biotech company, and what sets us apart is our business model, which has a very strong commercial focus. And there are really two parts to that. The first is our vision, which is to develop drugs with significant commercial potential in therapeutic areas where no treatments currently exist. And an example of that is our brain injury program. And this also extends into areas where current treatments are either too expensive, they may be inconvenient to use, or they may be suboptimal in the way they work. And an example here is the cholesterol lowering program. The second part to it is the focus for Nyrada, which is really on early stage drug discovery and development, where we look to add significant value to an asset early on. So I think investors should really think of Nyrada as an innovative company. So, focused on discovering novel drug targets, which we then take through human safety testing and then on to efficacy proof of concept studies. And by that, we're typically talking about a phase 2A. And at that point, we're looking to sell the asset or license it out. So, this is our model to grow the company and create value for our shareholders. Also, I believe that this approach is in tune with our skills and also the resources and the expertise that we're able to tap into.
And speaking of that expertise you can tap into, James, can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you bring to the role?
Yeah, sure. So I have more than 20 years experience in the global life sciences industry. And this includes a track record of successfully establishing and overseeing clinical trials, as well as interactions with the Food and Drug Administration, particularly in the area of neurology drugs. In fact, my recent experience has real parallels with Nyrada. So in my previous role, I was part of a team at Nyrada Pharmaceuticals that took a drug from early stage preclinical development through phase 2. And that drug was subsequently licensed out to an American company, Arcadia Pharmaceuticals, for more than $400 million US. So this provides me with a complete roadmap of what lies ahead for Nyrada.
Well, I'm sure the shareholders would be pleased if you could do something similar. Now, what attracted you to Nyrada in the company itself?
Well, there were two key things that attracted me to Nyrada. Firstly, its diverse portfolio of drug candidates. Starting with our two lead programs, that's the cholesterol lowering drug and the neuroprotectant drug to treat brain injury. So in those two programs, we've identified really exciting drug candidates with what we believe a significant therapeutic and commercial potential. The second thing that attracted me to Nyrada is the incredible caliber of the team involved. And that's all the way from the board down through the scientific advisory board and the scientists I lead. I would also add that I saw Nyrada as a good fit for me, and in particular, the brain injury program, because that's an area I'm familiar with, and I'll be working with a lot of the same people and organisations as before.
So we'll drill down. I'm interested to find out a little bit more about those 2 points in further detail. We'll start off with the team itself. Can you tell us a little bit about who's involved and what they bring, in terms of experience and background to the company?
Well, it starts with our board, which includes Christopher Cox, who was an executive vice president at the medicines company. And for listeners who follow pharma news, they may be aware that that company was purchased by Novartis in November of 2019 for approximately 14 billion Australian dollars. So it's great to have someone with his insight and contacts in the cholesterol lowering sector on board. The Scientific Advisory Board is packed full of leaders in their fields. It's led by Professor Gary Housley from the University of New South Wales here in Sydney. And Gary is a leading researcher in the biology and mechanisms behind brain injury. Also on our Scientific Advisory Board is Professor Gilles Lambert, who conducted much of the seminal research on our drug target for the cholesterol lowering program, and his expertise is in cholesterol metabolism. So we're really excited to have such a talented bunch of thought leaders in their respective fields involved in this project.
So, James, you mentioned there about the cholesterol lowering solution. Can you explain a bit more in detail about what that involves and what that, the potential there is for the market?
Yeah, sure. So the aim here is a drug that has the potential to help the approximately 40 to 50% of people who either don't respond adequately to statins or can't tolerate them to achieve their target cholesterol level. So our drug is a PCSK9 inhibitor, and PCSK9 is a protein that increases LDL cholesterol in the blood. There have been two PCSK9 inhibitors that were approved around 5 years ago, and they've been shown to work really well when combined with statins. However, these drugs have some problems. They're very expensive, and also they must be injected fortnightly or monthly. So where our solution differs is that with our drug, it being a small molecule, it's easy to produce and it can be combined with a statin. So this offers the possibility of a convenient and cost-effective single pill treatment. Just a comment on the market itself, and to put it into perspective, the opportunity. 28% of Americans over 40 currently take a statin. And the global statin market last year was worth about 20 billion US dollars. So this offers up a very substantial market for Nyrada to target. So where we're currently at with this program, we're optimizing our lead candidate, and we anticipate that we'll be in a first-in-human phase 1 study in late 2021.
Okay, James, and moving on to the treatment for the traumatic brain injury and stroke, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So Nyrada's neuroprotectant drug program is looking to develop an effective treatment for brain injuries. And when I talk about brain injuries, that includes traumatic brain injury, like you would experience a motor vehicle accident, a fall, or a blast injury. And it also includes stroke. So taken together, TBI and stroke are serious and life-threatening conditions that currently are really underserved in the medical community, and they represent significant unmet clinical need. So the aim with our drug is to limit the extent of brain injury following stroke or severe head trauma. And in particular, we see it as a good way of assisting people who survive a brain injury that, if left untreated, may end up with a permanent disability, or they may require long-term care. So, the area in brain injury is receiving significant interest right now. In the US, approximately 3.5 million people each year are affected, and that results in a combined cost to society of around about 90 billion US dollars. So it's really a huge problem. It's also receiving a lot of attention from the US military. Traumatic brain injury is currently one of their top health priorities, and we've identified many funding opportunities that may be available to us down the track. And we're looking at them as a potential collaborator.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of attention being drawn to TBI or traumatic brain injury in recent times, whether it's in sports with the NFL or boxing, and then also the US military recently with the strikes from Iran. A lot of the soldiers there have received injuries. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how you? I mean, obviously it's early stage, but is this something that someone would take straight after an injury, or how would this be taken? Do you see?
So that's a great question. Typically with these sorts of drugs, they're normally given as an intravenous infusion to commence as soon as possible after the injury. And they would normally be given over a period of 3 to 5 days. When you look at mild traumatic brain injury, so I'm talking more about concussion, uh, the aim here is to develop either an oral form or something that can be given through the nose intranasally.
Okay, and for us science geeks out there, what actually like does it do in terms of the neuroprotecting qualities? Like, what does it actually do to the body, or what are you trying to achieve?
Sure. So when you have a brain injury, there is a primary injury that forms almost immediately. And in the days and the hours and days following that injury, you get what's called secondary brain injury. And you could imagine it like an injury the size of a pea, perhaps, which continues to increase in circumference uh, over that period. And we know that loss of brain tissue or brain cells correlates with poor outcome. So what this drug does is it dampens down that secondary brain injury and reduces damage and improves patient outcomes.
All right, James, and circling back to the IPO, you guys raised the maximum amount of 8.5 million, which is great. Now, what will those funds actually be used on? What will be spent on, and what programs?
Sure. So the 8.5 million, which, as you pointed out, Philip, was the maximum amount we were after, those funds are going to be used to prepare our lead program for a phase one first in human study. And it'll enable us to take our second program mostly through to phase one. Um, it might be worth me mentioning here, because the question does come up from time to time, why Nyrada was formed as a US company. And the answer to that is pretty simple. It's to give us access or easier access to non-dilutive funding sources out of the US, and that includes US government grants. So, we're actively looking for non-dilutive funding both here in Australia and out of the US, and that's something we're actively pursuing.
I'm sure shareholders always love it when it's non-dilutive. What is that process? Because I remember I was at a biotech conference, and it was the first time I heard about this. And it's actually, I mean, for a company that's obviously trying to develop and needs funds to do that, these grants obviously seem to help along the way. Like, what's the process, and is it easy to get, and how long does it take to receive the funds?
Well, it's really a matter of just looking to see what funding opportunities are announced, and then having everything prepared so that you're ready to put an application in for an award or a grant that you believe you may be successful in. So we've got someone here looking out for us for potential grant opportunities, and also we have a company in the US who are doing the same thing.
That's great, James. Thanks for clarifying that. And now, what's ahead in the near term for Nyrada? What can investors look forward to?
Okay, so investors should look out for us making clear steps towards getting our programs into first in human studies. And the key achievements around that to look out for are selection of our lead compound for our cholesterol lowering candidate, and also our brain injury candidate. In addition, there'll be other news as we progress, and that will relate to discussions we're having with potential partners that share our mission.
Well, we look forward to tracking the story. But I've got one last question for you, James, before I let you go. Now, picture we're having this conversation in 5 years from now. Can you tell us how Narada's positioned and what you hope, the company is where it's situated?
Well, we'll hope to have our first deal under our belt by then and have our second program well and truly through the clinic. So, yeah, I think having two such significant programs ongoing at the same time is really exciting and a big challenge for us. I should also point out that, as I mentioned earlier on in the interview, we are a discovery company as well. So we've got an exciting pipeline that we're building to follow up as those two lead programs go through development.
Well, thanks, James. Appreciate your time and updating small caps listeners on Narada. We wish you all the best going forward, and we look forward to tracking your story going forward.
Yeah, so thanks, Philip. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about the Nyrada story, and we really appreciate the interest, particularly around the IPO. I'd invite listeners to visit our website for more information and also to follow our progress on social media.
Absolutely. You heard him, guys. Head over to the social media and Nyrada website. Obviously, you can check out news on smallcaps.com.au as well, and we'll keep you informed.